she's advertising this world where like everything is possible and all options are open to
Right.
you, and you're at a mall buying a video game.
Welcome to 1999, the podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Jen Tisdale.
And I'm the other one of your hosts, John Brooks.
And together, we're one.
Sure.
Well, that's sort of in theme with this movie. So,
oh,
today,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's right. Today,
yeah.
we are taking a virtual trip to a film that stretches the mind and asks the question, what if your body was a wonderland, Phil? You can sing it. I don't want to get dinged financially.
I don't want to sing it.
Everyone is singing, I hope. Released April 23rd, 1999, 3 days after the Columbine shooting. This little Matrix-adjacent motion picture is 97 minutes of Jude Law asking, is this real? Coming in lukewarm as the 174th highest grossing movie of the year between Cradle Will Rock and Love Stinks, a movie I like. It raked in a deeply sad $2,856,712, which is nowhere near its $15 million budget.
No, it's off.
Written and directed by body horror daddy David Cronenberg. It stars the aforementioned Jude Law, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Willem Dafoe, Ian Holm, my sweet baby from Fifth Element, Don McKellar, Callum Keith Rennie. It might be Calum. I'm so sorry, everyone. He sounds Irish. I don't know.
Callum, I think. Yeah.
I bet it is.
I've always said
Christopher. Callum. It's, I've got a clotter ring on. Should I take it off? Christopher Eccleston and
Eccleston.
Cameo. Is it Eccleston?
Eccleston.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I think I have a pretty high reading, but not today. Not today. Okay. Eccleston. I had to stop myself from singing to the tune of Eglantine from Mary Poppins. Okay. And a brief but glorious cameo of Sarah Polley.
Yeah, the other Sarah Polley.
Another 1999 classic. What movie?
Go.
You got it. Folks, hold on to your reality, whatever that means, because we're porting into eXistenZ. John, what is this fever dream about?
I don't really know. No, I do know.
Please say everything correctly. Eccleston.
You're Eccleston. I only know that because of Doctor Who. Who am I kidding? But
who are you kidding? Okay.
Who? I get it. In the immediate 1999 future, the world's greatest game architect who designs games using an organic structure, an unformed fetus-looking thing called a game pod, that feeds directly into a port in the human spine called a bioport via what amounts to an umbilical cord, stands before her devoted followers to demonstrate her latest virtual reality video game, eXistenZ. But before the game can begin, an attempt is made on her life by a realist, activists waging a crusade against virtual reality over concerns that it's a corrupting influence on humanity's ability to maintain its grip on actual reality, who shoots her with an organic tooth gun that he smuggled through security. Allegra and her doofy-doof publicist / bodyguard Ted flee the scene along with her game pod. On the run, they must enter eXistenZ together to make sure her game pod, which contains all of eXistenZ's coding, isn't damaged beyond repair, and solve the mystery of who tried to kill her so they can save the game world of eXistenZ from saboteurs before it is too late. As they head deeper into eXistenZ and games within games, Ted begins to ask the important question, how do you know what's a game and what's real?
Yes.
And then movie happens.
Yes. And yet another reluctant participant in something very cool. I'm tired of it. Yeah. I said it last time. I'll say it again. Be psychic, be a vampire, be ported into a virtual reality game with Jennifer Jason Leigh. Why are you all so weak? So weak.
Yeah. But there's a plot twist here that we'll talk about that you do see coming but don't see coming, and I think the way that it actually plays out, which is great and good Cronenberg-y. At 174th, as you said, eXistenZ was not one of the big hits of 1999, though it has some company in the 170s, including the Limey, Princess Mononoke, Cradle Will Rock, as you also mentioned, and Jen, Jawbreaker.
My fave.
An episode that Jen was on before Jen was on the show.
Before I was even myself.
A pre-Jen episode. It's not clear that it ever had the makings of a runaway hit, but it can't have helped that another heady sci-fi thriller about people who aren't sure if the reality they exist in is real, and it isn't, was released 3 weeks earlier in the form of The Matrix. Cronenberg was hardly a bankable commercial director either, with 1986's The Fly being easily his biggest mainstream success, but he was coming off of the indie hit Crash, his adaptation of J.G. Ballard's novel in 1996, which somehow made 10 times as much money as eXistenZ. But critics liked it. It has a 74% Rotten Tomatoes score and a 68 Metacritic score, with a fairly comparable audience score on both sites. It was also especially big, apparently, in San Francisco, with both the San Francisco Examiner's Wesley Morris and the San Francisco Chronicle's Bob Graham's Metacritic scores hitting 100, with Graham especially praising the whacked-out performance of Lee. Richard Corliss of Time joined the chorus of praise, calling the film weird and addictive, and Chicago readers Lisa Allspector writing, audaciously combining conviction and childish humor, the sci-fi thriller reminds us that the distinction between the tangible and the intangible may be frighteningly arbitrary, an idea that's made too scary ever to seem trivial, no matter how silly things get. And Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times also praised the film, writing, eXistenZ's arrival a few weeks after The Matrix, another science fiction movie about characters who find themselves in a universe created by virtual reality. The Matrix is mainstream sci-fi, but eXistenZ, written by Cronenberg, is much stranger. It creates a world where organic and inorganic are not separate states, but kind of chummy. Cronenberg's film is loaded with special effects as The Matrix, but they're on a different scale. Many of his best effects are gooey, indescribable organic things, and some of the most memorable scenes involve characters eating things that surgeons handle with gloves on. He places his characters in a backwoods world that looks like it was ordered over the phone from LL Bean. Then he frames them with visuals where half the screen is a flat background that seems to push them towards us, while the other half is a diagonal sliding off alarmingly into the background. Most of the negative reviews still seem to find things to admire about the movie, but not Slate's David Edelstein, who wrote, quote, I'll try not to eviscerate the laughably dour eXistenZ, a virtual reality guessing game of a thriller in which David Cronenberg, evidently licking his wounds over the calamitous receptions of Crash and Butterfly and Naked Lunch, goes back to the terrain he once profitably mined in Scanners and Videodrome. Cronenberg's early movies were somber but had horrific metaphors that ate into the mind, and he showed signs in The Fly and Dead Ringers of actually developing a sense of humor to complement his paranoid gynecologist's vision. But eXistenZ is a return to the lugubrious. It's named for a virtual reality game that the characters play with biopods, living disk drives that plug into vaginal holes at the base of people's spines. The only time Cronenberg seems to be having fun in the film is when he's exploring these squishy openings. As the game's ingenious designer, hunted by militant realists who want to stamp out virtual reality, Jennifer Jason Leigh is just the kind of drudge heroine that Cronenberg doesn't need. Trying to underact these days, she still can't walk across a room without looking self-conscious. And the rest of the performances by Jude Law, Ian Holm, Willem Dafoe, Christopher Eccleston, Jen, and Don McKellar are so terrible that it's hard to know whether Cronenberg wants to signal that much of what we're seeing isn't real, or he's just forgotten how to write for hemoglobular flesh vessels, i.e. human beings. So that's David Edelstein. David Edelstein, great writer, often very wrong about movies.
I don't think he's ever seen a vagina. I was just going to say that because those holes were not vaginal to me, but go ahead.
There's something I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about it with our guests. And our guest today, Jen, our returning champions to the show, friend of the network, friend of the pod, Jess Collins, who loves eXistenZ. And returning from the other Weird David episode that we did, the David Lynch straight story episode, fan of the Weird Davids, and film critic and writer and thinker and person who we love, Julia Sirmons. Hi, both of you. How are you? Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show.
I'm so excited to be back.
Yeah, me too. This is gonna be good.
Are you guys ported in? I just want to make sure we're all ported in. I want to get. We're all porta pottied right on in.
Ugh.
Cleaned up, ready to go.
You know it.
I'm
I'm just hold on.
wants to play.
Want me to get it all? God, one more lick. I also can't look at chapstick the same.
Oh man, this movie. Oof, I have a lot to say about it.
Well, that's why we're here.
I know, but like every time I think about the squishiness, oh god, it's so squishy. This movie, I swear to God. Anyway, let's just catch up with everybody. How's Julia? Julia, how are you doing? What's new in your world?
I'm great. I'm moved back to New York since the last time that we talked. And,
so you're not in like rural Colorado anymore?
No, you can take a train to movies. It is glorious, and I've just been covering the New York Film Festival, so I'm sort of in a wonderful glut of movies seeing and movie thinking and movie writing.
Anything good we should know about?
Yes. I think
give us the good movie. What's the good movie?
There was a good movie. I think my favorite, which is kind of weird and sexual in a different way than what we're going to talk about today, was Catherine Breillat's new film last summer, which is about the stepmother who has an affair with her stepson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, different kind of transgression.
I think I've heard about that movie. I heard people make mention of it, but yeah, there's a lot of those movies on the internet.
I was about to say, I think I know exactly where I've seen those search terms before.
I assume this is more of a high art version of concept.
But that does not mean it doesn't have its own special French kind of porny moments.
Sure.
Fantastique.
Jess, what's new with you? Anything?
Nothing much really. I just got back from New York. I work in New York now, so I commute back and forth from Virginia to New York every now and then. So I will admit I did not rewatch this movie, but I didn't have to.
No, I don't think you did.
Because I used to pick this movie up from my local Blockbuster at least once a month, and I would watch it 5 times in the 2 days that I could rent it, and then I would send it back. And I did that for about 5 years. I think about this movie a lot, so I am very excited to be back and to be talking about this incredibly strange movie.
My God, I'm afraid you know too much.
A little too much.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Jess, are you a Cronenberg person?
I think this is just my one that I'm like really obsessed with.
So like, are you not a fan of The Fly?
Oh no, I love The Fly.
Okay, there you go.
That's a great movie.
Yeah. The Fly is where the threshold is crossed for me. Like that's a movie I can't handle. Even though I think it's a great movie, like I cannot.
What part is it? When his whole mouth is falling off? What part?
That's sure. Let's take that one.
Oh, it's gotta be one. That's one. The big insect pupae that gets extracted from Gina Davis in her nightmare. That's kind of my...
Yeah. That part also I don't like. So
seems perfectly logical that would happen.
Yeah, I can handle the bloody, gushy squishiness of this movie, but like that one is just, except the scene where like Jude Law's eating all of those things at the Chinese restaurant. But we'll get to that.
I was telling John that I have trypophobia, or maybe I didn't tell you. I have trypophobia, which is a fear of holes. And fear is such a strong word. Basically, if I see a bunch of holes, I get incredibly nauseous. So I put the movie on and I went, oh no. And then it was just like nonstop port. port, stuff in the port, stuff out of the port.
Yeah.
And I thought, and then nothing else made me nauseous apart from Port City, USA. Just porting it up all day long, having a glass of port. Oh boy,
So
oh boy.
Yeah.
do you identify with Jude Law in this movie? Because he also clearly has a fear.
Well, I know he doesn't like to be, he was like, I don't like penetration. I said, well, Jude, I do. Consensually, of course. But it's just like if you were to hold up a honeycomb inexplicably right now, I would at least dry heave. It's not great. I'm thinking about it. I'm okay. Yeah, it's weird. It just, I don't know. Maybe some people have a legitimate fear, but as far as I know, you just get like very nauseous from like multiple, like, please don't, I can't look at a grate. I'm very limited in what I can stare at. But yes, so beyond that, love this movie. Love this movie.
Skip all the portholes and it'd be better.
Yeah. Julia, last time you were on, I asked you if you had to live with only one of the two weird Davids, you picked Cronenberg. So let's talk more about your love of Cronenberg and like where does eXistenZ fit in your Cronenberg pantheon?
So I'm a little afraid of being too dorky or too boring here because I come from an academic background. I studied film in grad school. And if you are in grad school studying film, loving Cronenberg is like the most basic choice you could make. Like academics love Cronenberg. He's hugely popular in media studies classes. I actually saw eXistenZ in a media studies class for the first time. And I think the reason he's so popular with academics is because there are a lot of Freudian themes in his work, and like he ended up making a movie about Freud, right? And a lot of the kind of like founding literature of academic film studies was based on like psychoanalytic analyses of movies. So while I definitely think there are huge limits to only looking at film through a Freudian lens, I carry with me from my academic days the belief that, there is such a thing as the unconscious, and that film is a great medium for exploring and interacting with that. And Cronenberg is just one of the best at that, I think. And I just happen to like it that he does it in this really gory, visceral way.
Yes.
Can't argue with that. So what are your like top Cronenberg movies?
The Brute is number one, just because like it's funny because he's been very clear about the fact that that movie was some kind of like sublimated aggression he had against his ex-wife when he was going through a divorce. But nevertheless, like the stuff about women's bodies and reproduction and like just it being so freaky and having this power to like really just scare the shit out of men is like really fascinating for me. Also, I would put Videodrome, which I think actually there are a lot of direct parallels between Videodrome and eXistenZ. And then really Crimes of the Future. I really loved it. I felt like it was
which one?
The 2022 one, the recent one.
Because he made two movies with that name, right? The first was like 1978 or whatever, and then yeah.
Well, those crimes finally caught up. So now this movie's actually about those future crimes. So those are technically crimes of the present.
I've never seen the first one, but I know that they're not related to each other. Like they're not the same movie. They just have the same title and the same writer and director, right?
Yeah. It's like Elon Musk wanting to name everything X.
That's really brave. I won't even like repeat a joke I wrote. So brave. David.
So I was saying to Jen earlier that in addition to like The Fly, I really like Cronenberg in general. I always think he's very interesting. I really love this movie, but also like hate this movie at the same time. I feel like that's true of a lot of his movies, and I really think that like Crash is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, and I really, really, really like angrily hate that movie. So And I love Dead Ringers. That's a great movie. What am I wrong about Crash, Julia? Is that a bad movie? Because I think it's a bad movie.
Well, I was thinking about should I have a little rewatch before we do this podcast, but it's not available to see.
That's good.
So
That's good for people.
I think I saw it at a young enough age where I just found the like subversiveness of it and the boldness of the text. So, um, you know, uh, cool and edgy that I think I talked myself into liking it, but I have no idea if I saw it after 10 or 15 years if I would maintain that opinion.
Okay. No, it's good. It shouldn't be viewed by people. It's a bad movie. I
and that's why you can't find it anywhere. John just scrubbed it from the internet. He's that powerful.
I saw it like in a movie theater when I was 18 because it was an NC-17 movie, and so it was the first movie that I went to go see like with my new power. And I liked Cronenberg, and I read a lot. Like I like J.G. Ballard too, and like a lot of its pedigree. I love the cast, right? And I was like, and I sat there for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and I was like, I am angry that I am here, and I would like to leave, but I don't like to walk out of movies because I want to have an opinion of a movie by watching the whole thing through. But yeah, but I suppose like at least I can say that it wasn't like a boring experience. Like I definitely formed, like I always have an opinion of Cronenberg's movie quite passionately, one way or the other. But I'm still kind of on the fence as to whether or not I like eXistenZ. So we'll talk it out. So let's see, let's go through what happens a little bit. I talked about the plot. I talked about sort of how it's set up, but we really need to talk about sort of the themes and the plot twists and so on and so forth. So we start, and things are very kind of like wonky, right? That first scene in the sort of the churchy sort of focus group room, whatever that is, and we get Chris Eccleston, and Chris Eccleston is speaking in a kind of undecipherable accent. And at first, I was like, what are you doing, Chris Eccleston? And then I was like, wait a second, maybe he's not real. That's that was my first
right
response.
Away. You knew right away.
Did I though? This is the thing. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys, like Jess, did you in the first time watching? I know like it's so long ago and you've watched it so many times, but like, did you
search back through 700 blockbuster watchings of this?
Yeah,
yeah, right.
Take it back.
Did you catch on kind of like early on that this whole idea of a virtual reality was like a movie within a movie or a game within a game sort of thing? Like what we're seeing wasn't necessarily real.
Yeah, I think that yes, I did. And I would say that because I am a huge game nerd. So I think that's why I loved and still love this very strange movie.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I cannot look at chapstick the same way. I have a glue stick on my desk right now, and every time I pick up a glue stick, I think the same thing. But I think if I go back into the archives of when I first watched this movie, I think what piqued my interest was the fact that you could completely immerse yourself in a gaming experience to the point where you didn't know what was reality and what was not. I mean, I like that the last line in the movie is that they ask if they're still in the game.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I really enjoyed watching this movie over and over again, is because I try to, every time I rewatch it, I try to pick up on, okay, well, does the top stop spinning? Are they really out of the simulation or not? But yeah, there's a lot, obviously. I've watched this way too many times for a person to have watched this film. And you can go back through and you can pick up little tiny pieces where it's kind of like a glitch in the Matrix, where you can see where they've been in the simulation or what part is actually real.
I can tell you that got a little quote here about what Cronenberg thinks about video games, if you're interested. from an April 1999 review in Metro Active titled Podman Out, which I love. A lot of great wordplay coming down the pipeline for you guys. So hold on to your hats. So when he was asked about, it's so funny to listen to them talk about video games and computers in this way. It's wild. So Cronenberg said, there's no equivalent in the movies of the increased chip speed and processing power that can give you better graphics. In games, the technological breakthroughs are what's promoted. It's never really a breakthrough of imagination or awareness. Kind of being a dick right now. And that's why I don't consider games art. The potential is there. And there's the interesting question of whether something that collaborative can be art. The old, relatively romantic view of the artist is that the artist has a vision which somehow seduces and raptures and takes you away to some other place.
Which is absolutely a video game, which is why I play thousands and thousands of hours of Sims.
This was again in 1999. And I looked up because I couldn't remember where we were with video games then. And we were pretty far along because, and I don't want to jump around too much, but when they were doing like the non-player, and what are they called again? Please just remind me when the non-player.
NPCs?
I'm doing this. I'm moving around, which is really going to mess the sound up. Yes.
NPCs.
When I saw that, I thought, I guess we were at that place in 1999 with video games, because I still think of 1999 as very far away. I was in my 20s. That's probably why I think of that. But yeah, we were at that place. So this was basically just a fantasy, strangely, about wanting to be in a video game, I thought, until I read about how much he doesn't respect them. And then I went, well, I guess not. But that's how it felt initially. Like, if I could put myself into a video game, this would be that.
I would say it's a big tension running through the film, is that like I think he is clearly interested and maybe even seduced by the possibilities of virtual reality in video games, but there is this anxiety that it will supersede cinema, it will take over cinema, and especially cinema's sense of realism.
He was not wrong. Mm-hmm. What's funny is that I just sort of replaced everything we were watching with AI right now. And I thought, well, that's my anxiety. That's what the A stands for. And I kind of like swapped them out in terms of what everyone was afraid of in this movie with what we're all dealing with now.
Yeah, what is it? The new Apple's new the alternate reality glasses or whatever that they're coming out with, where you can legitimately just sit and immerse yourself in another space. I mean, that could be your entire workspace. Is just everything that you see is what you can work with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
I actually don't either.
I don't like technology at all, which might be another reason why movies like this make me go, uh-oh. It makes me want to run and buy an answering machine immediately. Bring them all back. I want to go to the mall and I want a landline and I don't want to move forward even as we're using technology right now.
As a video game expert, do you think that this movie was right in its fears about VR, like, and how powerful it would become? Because I don't, it's not my field of expertise, but I kind of think like, if we still can't have legs in the metaverse, it's probably, his fears are probably overblown.
So sorry.
If AI can't do hands still, yeah,
guys, right? Everybody calm down. We can't even get extremities.
Hands are hard.
Calm down.
Come on.
Yeah, right. I think there's a really good Black Mirror episode about immersing yourself in being someone else. And I think about that episode. I think about that episode a lot as well. That
is it the HeartNet one? Because that's
no. You mean Fighting Vipers?
No.
Oh,
that they can.
The one with Anthony Mackie.
They're kind of porting in as well in the HeartNet one.
Right.
So.
And when I watched that episode most recently, yeah,
okay.
There's a lot of Black Mirror that.
Well, there's Game Test as well, which is very similar, right? To this theme.
Yes. As a person who has a job in the tech field, and I deal with tech and I deal with AI almost every day. It's I think this movie is absolutely correct in its fear of. I mean, you can even feel it when you watch the movie. There's a fear of even being in the game and being afraid that you don't know the difference. And I think that, if anything, this movie is even more prevalent today, given where we are with technology. I think this movie makes more sense now in 2023 than it did in 99.
I agree, and I think it does for like different reasons as well. I mean, I think there's themes and ideas in this movie that are relevant today that weren't relevant in '99, and maybe they weren't even intentional to what he's trying to do here. But I mean, I was struck by the idea of like not having shared reality and how sort of so much of like our political, you know, quagmire that we find ourselves in is like people who literally like don't live in the same reality space, and you know, for whom like consequences are different, and that there is no sense of like grounding of like what actually is true and what is real. And that to me was like a much more kind of profound insight than even just sort of the virtual reality thing. I do think there's something really interesting that this movie does philosophically that like the Matrix and other kind of like, you know, how do you know what's real movies don't do. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But I also am glad that you brought up Black Mirror, because I was thinking the whole time, much like with our last movie, Stir of Echoes, being like a long X-Files episode without Mulder and Scully, this really felt to me like the sort of prototype of Black Mirror, right? Like this fits directly into what Black Mirror does and how it does it, and like what Black Mirror, it would work perfectly as a Black Mirror episode. Albeit a fairly long one. But yeah, it seems really kind of prescient even in that sense, that it predicted sort of what our version of the Twilight Zone would look like, you know, a couple of decades later when Black Mirror started. So they're definitely, I mean, this is ahead of its time in a lot of really interesting ways that I don't think anybody would have seen coming 25 years ago.
I feel like, did you guys get, I thought two things. One, I was wondering how much of this movie was informed by the fact that everyone was incredibly panicked about Y2K. A lot of technology fear was
of the whole year was
everybody was just
that.
Absolutely terrified. And I do wonder, or maybe it's already out there and I haven't read it, so forgive me, but I bet The Matrix and this are a direct result of that fear. What's going to happen when the clock takes over? But something weird that happened at the very end, again, not to jump ahead, when everything was played out with, I guess, the military being there, I got this bizarre sense that if this were today, those guys would be more QAnon. With this like rabid, this like deep fear of things that are going on around them, this lack of understanding, this need to use violence to keep it under control. And I was like, Cronenberg, you son of a bitch. You did it. You made me remember this while watching this movie. I come here to escape. I'm back in it. So yeah, I just did find that interesting. He's very, for all of his technology related films, he's very good about the human condition, I find.
Yeah, and it's a recurring theme in a lot of his movies. In like scanners and video drones, there are these underground cells or resistance networks that are trying to like stop technology from, you know, changing the world too quickly or dissolving our idea of reality. And I think he's always like they're almost kind of Puritan in their like death to the demonists, you know, and you know, long live the realists and all this stuff. And I think even while he himself is afraid of losing realism because of these new technologies, he never misses the chance to point out that these people are a little bit nutty.
Yeah. And also, Julia, you might know more about this, but I seem to I have it in my head that so I know that this was, okay, I also have this in my head, so I don't know this for a fact, but I'm pretty sure that this was the first movie that he wrote an original screenplay for since Videodrome. Does that sound right? Because everything else was adapted, I think.
Oh,
right?
I don't
Fly,
know. That would make
Crash,
sense.
those are all adaptations. So I think this is his first like fully originally written and directed movie. And I remember reading something about how it was inspired by like Salman Rushdie.
I can confirm that it was about, because she has a fatwa and he had that famously.
Yeah.
A fatwa. Am I saying that correctly? I can't pronounce things tonight. And so after interviewing Salman Rushdie for a Canadian magazine, the title of which I can't remember the name, I want to say Shift or something. I have it in one of my little tabs. This is what made him want to, what if instead of an author or journalist, it was a game designer who everyone was trying to kill, was headhunting. I guess.
So it's interesting that he takes like Salman Rushdie and turns that into a game designer. Like there still seems like when I read that, I'm like, I'm missing some steps. Like where do we go from like famous author with a fatwa to like video game designer with a fatwa with this like weird QAnon people out there?
It's interesting because it's like a move between like extremists for religion towards extremists for reality and for realism.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting shift.
I can tell you that, once again, talking about these extremists and these small groups of people, from the IGN's movie section, which we used to be called Daily Movies in 1999. I think they leveled up with the name. The person asked, they were like, you tend to deal with a small group of people isolated from the rest of society in your films. And he goes, that's right. But then his answer is a little, I'm not sure. He goes, it almost replicates my experience as a director, like directing Crash in the middle of the night in Toronto, sitting in the middle of 8 lanes of freeway on my director's chair, watching a monitor and being completely oblivious of everything around me. It's not just my characters. It's me, in the sense that I don't really want to expend energy with things that don't interest me in the movies. For example, in Crash, there were a lot of car crashes and no police. I wasn't interested in the direct social impact of what these people were doing, because that's not what I was discussing in the movie. It was something much more internal, introverted, and obsessive. In Scanners, I'm not interested in the way the city works or the life of the city around the characters. I'm interested in the subterranean culture of the Scanners, which itself is very obsessed and very inner focused. I don't deal with that other stuff because that's not what the subject of the movie is, even though, realistically speaking, other forces would be involved. But then, what's the realism? This reminds me of the time I was at a Q&A at a monster movie, like horror convention, not to brag. And someone stood up and asked John Carpenter a very long question. And you could tell that he's a big fan and they love him so much. And John Carpenter's answer was, I don't know, kid. I was just getting a check for it. And I watched heartbreak in front of my face. And I was like, Carpy, come on, buddy. Just answer it. And give him something. He's here. He's asking about Ghosts of Mars. So that's what that answer felt like. He's like, it's just me in the director's chair. I'm not making any big claims about society. I'm just by myself in a chair. David. Hope that helped, guys. He's not making any.
But he is. And he clearly is. I mean, yeah. I mean, he is, right, Julia? Like, you know a lot about him. He's saying things.
Yeah, I actually I don't find him to be like overtly hostile or confrontational when he gives interviews. He's just generally, I think, very, very blunt. And but he's not blunt in a way that's like, I don't know, whoever gets someone at Cannes, some French director gets asked a question and he just goes like, no, I'm not going to answer that. That's not what Cronenberg is like, but he's sort of very direct about his unique experience. And what sounded so interesting in that quote is that does kind of speak to a desire to be like submerged into like another level of reality or another, your own mind and your own consciousness in a way that speaks to the seduction of eXistenZ in the movie, I think.
That's a good point.
Yeah, there's no way that you can watch this movie and not be completely just... you watch this movie and, like he's saying, he's directing, he's in the chair, he doesn't know what's going on around him. There's no way you can watch this movie and have any idea what's going on around you because you're trying to figure out what the heck is happening.
And distracted by the squishiness.
The whole time. Yeah.
I
mean, my not to be crass my first thought was these people have little tiny breasts on their laps, and I knew that I understood that this was a focus group in church, and it felt like they were saying, "Is technology the new god?" I'm like, probably. We're in this church with it, but I just thought to myself, these have to be prototypes. They're not taking this to market. Remember in our last episode, I brought the economy into it. Well, now I'm bringing marketing and PR because, frankly, I was aghast at what I was thinking. Like, we're going to put these umbilical cords in these little boobies.
You and Ted Pikel would have a great conversation with each other about marketing and PR because that's his game.
Happy to bring him into it.
Old Ted Pikel. I want to know. So this is something that I've been thinking about. We decided to pick this movie as a horror movie for our horror round. And I think when we talk about horror and we talk about Cronenberg, we are in a very weird space, because I don't think any Cronenberg movie isn't a horror movie, but I also don't think Cronenberg's ever made a horror movie, like full stop, right? So for Julia, from sort of the film studies side of this, and Jess from the sort of horror movie fan side of this, how does this work as a horror movie, or like, can it be put into a genre neatly, or does it evade genre the way that like David Cronenberg movies kind of tend to do?
Well, I could again be like the Freudian asshole and be like, well, this is a journey into the subconscious, which is always a horror story or something like that.
There you go. That's an answer.
But
I like that.
That's a great answer. Please do it.
Yeah, I think like the horror of not being able to get out of the game, or not being able to distinguish reality from the game, is this really kind of like existential horror. And
existential, damn it.
I think that the way that the fusion of body and technology and all this like weird stuff, like the weird squishy stuff we're talking about, like, to me they kind of looked like external fetuses.
Yeah, me too.
And she Allegra calls it her baby and stuff, and like
I can't wait to get into that relationship.
And to me, all the like soft squishy stuff, like, it just, for me, everything looks vaguely like a sex toy. And
yes,
yeah, and just like the idea of like that we're having these experiences that are like the echoes of old experiences, that's like, it's sex but it's not sex, and it's reality but it's not real, and like, it's my body being penetrated when I don't want it to be penetrated, and like all these kind of like, if horror is about like monstrosity that is like indistinguishable or sort of unformed or not one thing or the other, then I think you could make a case for this as a horror movie on that level, for sure.
And there's like enough blood for it to be a horror movie.
But it was medical blood. It was always
medical.
No, not when
like
you like
butcher medical. It was
like, that's true. But not when he like shoots shoots the Chinese waiter in the face with the tooth gun. Like,
sure, which was incredible,
Yeah.
guys. When I tell you, I miss practical effects with my entire being, and I'd love for them to return full time, 40 hours a week, if I could, with benefits.
Jess, how does it work as a horror movie for you?
As someone who has watched so many horror movies that I feel desensitized to horror movies in general, and jumping in my time machine, I never considered this a horror movie. I think I personally viewed the movie through the lens of, this is potentially where our future could go, and here we are with VR goggles in 2023, and I'm glad that the prototype is not a fetus with an umbilical cord attached to it, and we don't have to chapstick up our neck buttholes.
I mean, the amount of chapstick I've lost in my life alone, like, now I'm buying more port chapstick. Can I use my Burt's Bees for this in a pinch? I don't know. It just felt like, how you create, it's like Apple style, like, ooh, we keep creating things so that we need to create more things. And that Jobs would be like, look, it's my Apple chapstick. And I'd be like, Steve, you know what I'm saying? Just feel the potential to keep creating more marketing things for this one thing. Like, guys, please. Now it's a lipstick. Come on.
It seems like if you're in a pinch, you can lick it, right? Because
I hated it. Julia, you're right. And I hated seeing it every time. And I also, what I also don't like? The amount of times people are going to lay fully dressed on top of the bedspread of a hotel. We all know by now, strip the hotel. Don't use the comforter. They rarely wash it. Get into those sheets. I'm tired of watching Jennifer Jason Leigh splayed out on a potentially dirty. Now I'm talking about that.
Isn't she worried that her port's going to get infected?
No, because guess what? Her mouth never has somehow been infected. Ergo, her port never will. I was like, Jen, I have a little canker sore right now.
Well, Jen, you're also a horror movie maven, so like, again, what do you think? Is it horror or no?
I do think I would be curious I'd have to go back in time. God, if only. And watch this with 1999 eyes. I think it's impossible for me to say
Yeah.
accurately now, knowing what the world is like. I think the thing that I found the most interesting, that I wouldn't even say is scary, but watching Jude Law and of course Jennifer Jason Leigh when in the game do things that they, as their characters were taking over. But I kept thinking, like, are these characters, or are these just like another part of you that's coming out in the game, and you're doing things that are making you uncomfortable? But are these things you'd really like to do?
Mm-hmm.
Is Jude Law really a killer? Which we find out perhaps, is that another uncomfortable aspect? Not knowing what's in the game, but also being uncomfortable with the person you're becoming in the game.
Yeah.
As someone who's been diagnosed with a little something or something or two in my life, I know the feeling of often, before I was in therapy, not feeling it like I was in control of my own decisions. And I look at that and I go, oh, I did feel that
Yeah.
fear of not being in control of your
Yeah,
self.
I felt a little too seen by the the moment where he's like, "I don't want to eat this, but I feel compelled to." That kind of hit a nerve for me. But also, there's like that great little meta moment he throws in there with before they like start making out and doing stuff, and she's just like, "This is a pathetic attempt to to make the next sequence of events feel more emotional." It's like I see you there, David.
Yeah.
Yep. He doesn't want to, don't lead him down. He doesn't want to be led. Don't lead him there. I also thought, to touch on that scene really quick, that they had very good chemistry for that one
Yeah.
second make out
Yeah.
sesh. I bought it. I felt that I'd love to see more of that.
No, I agree. And like, awkward Jennifer Jason Leigh and doofy Jude Law make a good couple. But like, I'm also just astonished at how doofy Jude Law is in this movie, considering again, it's the same year as the talented Mr. Ripley, and it's like, how is this the same fucking person? I don't understand that at all. Maybe
From
it's virtual reality.
doofy to dickhead,
From
in one
doofy to
beautiful,
like, but also like the most beautiful person who ever lived in the like in the town of Mr. Ripley, from this like weird doofy guy with this very strange zip up like sweater thing that just it's terrible. But no, I also think that like insofar as I consider Black Mirror to be a horror series, like first, right? I'm I remember, and I think the reason why this always stuck in my head as like a horror movie more than a sci-fi movie is because it's so similar thematically to The Matrix. And the thing in my head I always like distinguished was like, this made me feel really uncomfortable. And all I remember is the splattery, gooey squishiness of it, and just being really uncomfortable and on edge the entire time. And I felt that way watching it again this time, just really like awkward and not content ever, right, throughout the entire movie, even though I kind of like I knew the plot twist already, and remembered basically how it all played out. I still like, yeah, I mean Cronenberg is kind of his own genre, I guess, but I still think this works if you're expecting to be like unnerved by a horror movie. I think it works on that level. And the other thing that like I think is just really unnerving is that twist ending, which we've talked about already, but like it's the thing that it does that all the movies about sort of like how do you know your reality is real, be it like The Truman Show or Dark City or The Matrix, right? This adds this layer of like, well, what if we got to a point with sort of augmented realities that you literally couldn't know that? Like there is no right answer because there's always some doubt that you're actually just within one of the layers of the game. And the way that they kind of keep going deeper into the game in this, right? It's so effective that I had the thought that the guy had before the guy had the thought, where he ends the movie by saying, how do you know you're not still in the game? And I'm like, right, exactly. I was just fucking thinking that, and you wouldn't, and you'll never know. And that's what's so terrifying about all of this. And like that idea of not just losing connection to reality, but having no way of fishing it back, like that is this deeply terrifying thing that he fucking just leaves you with, and it's like, and credits, and you're like, fuck, man, like, don't do that is unkind. Don't leave me there, Davy C. But yeah, I definitely, I would not recommend it to people who don't have a threshold for horror movies. I'll say that much. Right. I think like that's where I would say, yeah, it's pretty horrific. And also
Yeah.
the gooey, splashy bloodiness.
It's a lot of goo.
Like the scene with the umbilical cord where he's like cutting the umbilical cord. I'm like, nope. It's just like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here right now.
He adapted pretty quickly, that Jude Law, from,
He did.
ooh, I don't know about this too. I'm cutting umbilical cords. I will say that final scene, I felt a deep disappointment over the fact that Jennifer Jason Leigh wasn't the best game designer, that it was just a guy.
Just
like
a dude.
2023, I was less of a feminist in 1999, I'll admit. I was 19 and stupid. I even think I openly said I wasn't, because I was an idiot. Now, I looked at that and thought, oh man, so it's just this guy? What a bummer. Now, again, who knows if there's another level, but I felt really sad about that, and I was very worried about where that dog went. Whose dog was that? Why are we bringing this dog? Leave dogs out of it. They don't want to be there except for weapons.
Again, I'm not the expert here, but it is interesting in today's time to think about how female video game designers are treated, and the fact that she's both demonized and treated as a guru is, I think, like something interesting to explore.
Well, I have a question about, I remember Gamergate, but Jess, like, are women ever deified? Because it just seems like women are primarily crapped upon, both in general and in the gaming world. I don't know if you can speak to that.
Honestly, I don't know. The games that I play are mostly, RPGs. There's a lot of people involved in creating them and building them, so I can't speak to that. I'm sure that I know there was a thing going around a couple of years ago, or maybe it was recently, about this. So I try not to involve myself. I just try to enjoy playing the game and not get into what feels like the political aspect of the back end nature of the game.
Back end.
He was asked about the port placement in one of these interviews, if I can find it. Yes, in the IGN movies, the artist formerly known as Daily Movies. The movies you watch daily. These are my daily movies. So they asked, why'd you put the bioport, why'd you have the bioport, the place where the GamePod interfaces with the gamer, installed at the base of the spine, as opposed to, and how this person's flexing, up near the cerebral region, closer to the medulla oblongata of the pineal gland? Guy, let's ask him why'd you put it there, is the real question. This guy's going to med school first. And then David Cronenberg goes, cosmetics. I mean, would you want one in your head?
That's where it is in the Matrix, right? In the back of your neck.
Well, yeah. And then they went further. I don't know if I'd want one lodged in the base of my spine either, to tell you the truth. And he says, why not? The base of the spine seems like a pretty good place to have it.
Yeah.
To me, it's just logic, and then it's design. If I were designing the system, I'd be thinking, okay, how many people are going to want one in their hair or in their face where everybody can see it? First of all, it marks you as someone who is a game player. Maybe you don't want people to know that. It's also a matter of cosmetics. If you're going to have an operation, you don't want the scar to show. So why not have it someplace where it wouldn't show? To me, you want access to the central nervous system, and the spinal cord is as good a pathway to that as any. That's my design sense. In terms of sexual imagery and metaphor, the base of the spine is a much more provocative place to have it. And the guy goes, it's definitely a sensitive area. And Cronenberg goes, and sensual. Sassy. I like it. I like it.
This is the one place where I do really want to bring some Freud in, because the baby Jude Law, our angelic little doofus, like he's so prim and so afraid of penetration.
Yes, this beautiful man is somehow a virgin in a specific way. Yeah, right.
And like he's unable to let go, right? And so like the OCD he had, Freud called that anal retentiveness, and he had this his idea, right, that was all trauma that goes back to toilet training, and like when you've been
Right.
you punished because you let go, and so you feel like you can't let it go. And I do think that explains a lot of poor Ted's predicament.
That is good.
There's also like so the thing is, the whole like bio dead fetusy squishy thing that is the computer game is illogical the entire time. Nobody comments on the illogic of it. David Edelstein doesn't like the illogic of it because he didn't apparently see the ending of the movie where it's illogical because it's not real. That's not really what happens. I wonder if, like, I mean, obviously there is like her Allegra's like, you know, coddling of her baby, all that sort of thing. There's all sorts of like ideas about creation and creator and like the fetishization of like, you know, technology and whatever else. But like none of it actually matters because none of that is the actual game pod. That's not the reality that we're left with at the end. That is what's in the game that they're playing in eXistenZ at the end of it, right? So, like, there's something about that too that I think is like I keep trying to kind of unpack as to like why these characters who we discover at the end are like the true, as far as we know, version of the characters. Why their games played out the way that they did, and like what that says. Like what, like, you know what I mean? Like otherwise
I
it's
could
just
tell
sort
you.
of like okay, yeah, go ahead.
I think it's because as angry as they were and as dedicated as they were, which resulted in the murder of 2 people, I do think it's one of those things where I think you doth protest too much.
Yeah.
And here you are railing against this thing. And I think it's because you secretly are interested in it, curious or whatever. And the way to overcorrect is to become this militant. So I feel like that could be one explanation as to why in the game they are the polar opposite of who they are in either reality or this next level of the game, whichever it ends up being. So that's my theory.
And if it is true at the end that Allegra is a realist, like a radical realist, and she is playing the role of the game designer in the game, uh, doesn't it make sense that she would have her vision of it would be more biological
Yes.
and soft and
Yeah.
squishy?
Ooh, yeah.
She's
Yeah.
like a big technophobe.
Yeah.
Yes.
That makes sense
Ooh,
to me.
Julia. That's good.
I also, so like from an aesthetic standpoint, right? I also found it more interesting this time, kind of observing it more, that a lot of the things that sort of annoy me about the movie are also kind of part of the point. And I think even down to like the terrible ADR, where like nobody really seems to be talking. Like they whisper a lot, first of all, which is like really strange, but like nobody seems to be talking at like the right volume or like with any kind of, they're all sort of at the same sort of flat volume the entire time, and some of the ADR doesn't even like quite at like line up the right way, right? And I think I don't know,
Do you think that's intentional?
I
Is what
kind
you're
of do.
asking?
I kind of think it is, and that it's part of the like artifice of trying to tell, like communicate to us that what we're seeing is fake, right? On top of the like more obvious clues, which we can talk about in a second as well.
Like
But
her hairstyle.
Thank
yeah,
you. I was obsessed
Yeah.
with it because it changes all the time,
yeah,
and I was trying to figure out, like, does it
Yes.
track to what level of reality
I
we're
think it
on?
does. Yes. The deeper
apparently
she
it's
goes, the
wavier.
wavier it
Yeah, it
gets.
gets the
Yeah.
further she is into the alternate realities, and it's like straight in the so-called real world.
It looks great
And
every time. She
yeah,
looks great. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Yes, Jude Law's handsome. We know. Jennifer Jason Leigh is not like I'll say classically beautiful by some Hollywood standard that I don't fully understand. But I thought she looked so great. And I thought she was funny in this movie.
mm-hmm.
Subtly funny, but still funny. This movie's very funny. I laughed many times. Jude Law's also putting in a heck of a slapsticky performance. All of his drama when he flops forward into the chair after like getting his poured. I was like, oh, this is very funny. This is fantastic. Oh.
I think this is the absolute sweet spot for Jennifer Jason Leigh. She's not exactly a femme fatale, but she's kind of a siren, pulling him into the pleasures and the beauty of the world as she sees it. But she's just very she's very sexy in this kind of weird loose cannon kind of way where it's like, okay, this could be fun or it could be a disaster. And she really does that so well.
Yeah. And she has a ski boot for a purse, which is how you know you're in the future when something weird happens. Although I think I read that Cronenberg said this is not supposed to be the future. It's just supposed to be a different version of the present. So this is, if this has been labeled a dystopian future film, according to Cronenberg, it's a dystopian present, which that's where we are. That's where we are now. So we did it.
Yay, we made it. We're in the dystopian present. Good job, everybody.
Yes, we did it.
And again, much
accomplish things.
Much like Black Mirror in that sense, is that it all sort of takes place in whenever, right? But just sort of like some recognizable variation of where we are and like what we have. And you just have to like alternate, you just have to advance VR technology just slightly to like get us to this place, and it doesn't really matter sort of when it is. No, I never thought about it in the future at all. I don't think any of that really mattered. And also because, again, we find out that like nothing is really actually real. There is no real time or place, right, where the movie actually exists, because it takes us out to that last scene, which could be anytime, anywhere. It wouldn't really make a difference, right, one way or the other. But yeah, I think like it felt like a lot flatter and like uglier than a lot of Cronenberg's aesthetic is kind of ugly anyway. Like he kind of likes ugliness, I feel like. But like I felt like he was kind of upping that to signal to us that none of this is real, and like trying to figure out where reality begins is sort of part of the game. And then some of it's like really obvious, again, with the whole like she says any country gas station, and then they wind up at a place called Country Gas Station, right, with like a guy played by Willem Dafoe named Gas, and like the obviousness of Ian Holmes' accent, which he then comments on at the end of the movie, which is a great meta joke. I love that.
I literally thought, I can't understand a single thing he's saying. And then he comes out of the game and he goes like, I couldn't understand myself. Yeah. And I was like, Ian, same. I don't know what you were saying by the end.
You were like a weird Bond villain. And then, of course, like our little dragon friend our little two-headed dragon friend, who is the ultimate kind of signal of like, no, this also isn't the real world unless they've invented weird little dragon two-headed guys that we didn't know about. That's part of the plot. But yeah, what's the deal with the two-headed dragon guy? I feel like there's more to him than just a signal that this is all
just
fake.
A meal.
I don't know.
A meal at some point. He was just there to become a gun, another skeletal gun.
And why are there tooth guns? I want to know about this. What the hell is that all about? Is that a video game thing, Jess? Is that one of those like you can build anything from like random shit in video games, and so why not a tooth gun? Is that
No, but I mean, if you think about it in the sense that now you can print guns with 3D printers, why can't you use your teeth as bullets?
Yes,
that's so fucked up.
Yes,
I don't
guys,
like tooth
don't do
stuff
that
either.
if you're listening.
Ugh.
Well, I also wonder, not that this is a dream, but like a prominent dream scenario is losing one's teeth. Your teeth are always showing up in your dreams, and not that this was a comment on that, but I wouldn't be surprised because like we hold our teeth in a very high regard.
We talked about this last episode too, with Kevin Bacon's teeth falling out in that one
pulling
scene.
His teeth
it's a whole
out
thing.
in front of a mirror.
So much tooth
I hate
stuff
to see it
in this show now. Ugh.
Leave these teeth alone, guys. Floss after this, please. So yeah, I think maybe there might be something to that. I mean, but also teeth just make the most sense in terms of like, what are you going to use as a bullet in your body, really, that you can pull out that's not going to kill you?
Yeah,
your teeth. Now let's think about it some more. No, I'm kidding.
So listen, like here's the other thing about this movie that I think a lot of people were turned off by, because a lot of people assume that this is a movie full of like bad performances. But it's actually good actors doing bad performances on purpose, right? Like, do we get that sense? The whole time I'm like, this isn't Jude Law really acting. He's much better than this. I don't like what the fuck is going on? And Jude Law is also very awkward with an American accent. I think that's also part of it. But like, I mean, Julia, like I I feel like this again is like a film thing. I feel like the bad performances and sort of the over the top artificial performances are also kind of part of the point.
I mean, like the thing is, right, it all depends on how you slice it, right? If you're looking back and seeing this as like an intentional act, either for him as a realist against Allegra, or for like if you decide what side they're on, that's how
Oh,
you
right,
then
because
determine
he's playing. That's right, because he's in the game. He's conning her as well. Okay,
yeah.
I didn't even thought about that.
Which says something about that relationship. I
Yep.
would unpack that once we got out of the murder church. Like, honey, why did you want to?
Yes.
God, the game ended when you shot me in the back. She's like, I don't know, that's weird. Maybe we have some stuff to talk about. Maybe we don't.
They like to play together.
That was very ominous.
I think the part that he did genuinely sell really well for me is the primness and the ninniness and the like uptightness. I felt like for such a like a man who can be so suave and sexy, he does a really good job of just being like, ugh, don't touch me.
Yeah.
I have to keep it.
I mean, they had to put him in a full, like, comfy, cozy, not flannel, like his inside clothes. They were like, we gotta
it's fleece.
Unattractive, this man.
Yeah.
But yes, we were fleeced by his fleece. He was head to toe fleece, and I still was like, handsome. You got to do a lot to Jude Law. Not even turning him into a murderer. I was like, still would. I was interested. I was interested in their demeanor the second they came out of the game for the 10 millionth time, presumably at the end. How together they both were, how different he was, even his posture, everything changed. He was so authoritative and not, and suddenly it was like all him, and she was quite demure. And again, I was like, damn it, but still loved it. Loved how absolutely different they both were. Like a dom sub switch almost. Like outside, she's the dom, inside, excuse me, she's the dom, he's the sub. Outside, it's reversed. And I was like, well, this is just interesting.
Yeah.
It's a real walk through their psyches.
Yeah, and he has that line. He's like, just so you know, in real life, she would not be sleeping with any security guard except me. He's to make it public. Everybody has to know.
And they're all like,
everyone's like, what? Yeah. We weren't even there for that.
I just love when Eccleston starts using his actual accent. And I'm like, there it is. Thank God. And he's like, wow, what was I sounding like? And I'm like, ha 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 ha. That's what I thought too. Where are you supposed to be from in that scene in the beginning? There is no place where people actually talk with that accent, whatever the hell that is. I found that very funny and very sort of comic relieving. But then, of course, you're like, oh, this can't possibly be how it ends because shit's got to go bad here. And Sarah Polley for some reason, just like in the movie.
Sarah Polley in a wig.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
And the very 90s T-shirt under the spaghetti strap dress.
Mm-hmm. Chunky shoes. Chunk. And love to see it.
And possibly a villain we'll never know because she got shot in the head before we even got to know her.
There was one scene at the end quickly that I almost thought, oh, this looks like today. I don't know if you guys caught it. It was super quick. I think it was when Sarah Polley and the actual game designer were off to the side talking, and they quickly panned back over to everyone still sitting in the church, and every single person was hunched over what looked like a cell phone. They were all hunched over looking at screens. And I went, what are these? I wonder what these are supposed to be. It looked so modern.
Because in 1999, we didn't know what that was. And I realized that too, because I was like, oh, they're all on their phones. And I'm like, wait, no.
Even the gentleman coming out of the bathroom.
Yeah.
He was holding it in his hand like a tablet, like he was reading it in the bathroom. And I went, oh, shit. Did Cronenberg know something that we did not know?
Or did Canada just have stuff that we didn't have?
The time machine.
You never know with those
really
Canadians.
Interesting. They were all hunched over staring. They could have been on the subway.
And they were doing this, like scrolling through it with their finger like you do. And nobody did that in 99.
I went, oh, what? And then the chaos ensued and I forgot.
I think that's I've been, since you asked Jess that question about like women programmers and stuff, like I've been thinking about that too. Like I kind of like a lot of a lot of the stuff that was novel and or like unheard of in 99 that you can now kind of take for granted and have to kind of rewind your brain to like put you in that space, right? And that being one of them, because I definitely watched that scene and was like, oh, that's fine, they're on their phones, right? That's a normal thing that I see. And then
Didn't
I'm
even
like,
think of it. I didn't think
no.
twice because those postures, they're like they're fully in my brain now. The
Yeah.
people just hunched over, hands on their knees, staring at a screen. It didn't even clock it. It's strange.
I do think within sort of like the software development world and the sort of video game world of the late 90s, as we're coming into like PC gaming and like World of Warcraft and like the PlayStation 2 era, that the place that women had within that field at the time, I think, was incredibly fetishized. And if you think from like, Lara Croft as like the first major female protagonist in a game for boys, but also like it's Lara Croft, right? And also like when you think of the cultures of places like, like Microsoft or whatever, that the women there are like, the smart women are both like fetishized, but also like they're like revered, but also thought of as like, property in this weird way. Like I think that there's a whole culture from that era that we've kind of lost, that the Allegra storyline probably speaks to, that we maybe don't quite have the same access to anymore. And that like the fact that there are just way more women in gaming who play games and like are stars of games and are coding, and like, yes, Gamergate and shit like that happens and that sucks, but it's also way more normal. Because there were no girls playing video games when I was a teenager. Like it was a thing for like dorky boys, right? And then like sure, but like I didn't know any, and I barely knew any like of my fellow like boys who play video games. It was still a very sort of like fringe dorky thing. I'm talking like the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis days, So yeah, I do think like there is a moment in time with that story that probably is captured there, that I think someone who knows that world better could probably write something interesting about, as commentary for like Allegra as this like fake person who's not an actual designer. Like that's the important thing.
Wait, you know what's so interesting as you're saying this? I'm thinking of like when we come back to presumed reality and the out of transcendence the game, and we're presumably in the real. Allegra thanks the real designer Evgeny Nourish for letting her play the part of the game designer in this way that's maybe a little bit like, thank you for giving me a mere woman this opportunity. And then he kind of says to her, you were so good at it, I'm sure they're going to make you a game designer one day, Missy.
That was so condescending.
Keep doing STEM.
But wait, I guess that begs the question. Now maybe I don't understand how the game works. I thought those were chosen roles by each individual person, but now it sounds like he chose their roles.
I don't know. Jess, how do you rate that? Is that like a subconscious thing that like, I don't know. You've seen it a million times. You tell us, how do they get those roles in the game?
I still feel like they are assigned the roles that they're given. So they don't get to play something different every time. They always play the same role. But also, if you think about it, if they were doing like a demo, then potentially they were given that role so that they could be that person in the game, just to showcase what it could be like.
Yeah, I mean, because like this gets into an area that's interesting to me that maybe we don't have to talk a lot about, but like the ways that like the game is actually quite boring in certain ways. Like, can you imagine, like, I understand that it's Allegra's psyche that is, designing all the scenarios and the plot and stuff, but it's like, it's like she's advertising this world where like everything is possible and all options are open to
right.
you, and you're at a mall buying a video game.
Yeah.
Like,
honestly, this just felt like an escape room to me. Like they just had to follow a series of clues in order to get out of it.
Well, that's what's so interesting about the Gas character too, is that like Willem Dafoe, right, that's like the real guy, is playing this character who thanks Allegra because his life as the character that he is in the video game was so boring, and so she created a game within that game where he had an interesting life. And like it's so like it's like, wait, where is it interesting though? Like when
he's
does that happen? But he already is jacked in. Like he's
jacked in again.
Like he's so, yeah. It's that's kind of.
But is it that they are playing? Is it that their characters have their own storyline when you don't see them, and you're only really seeing the game from her perspective?
Right.
Because
right. And
so like maybe their lives are interesting before we get to them, and then they're at this point in the game where they have to be in this certain spot to converge with her storyline.
That's really fun to think about. Like that's technically his job.
Right.
Gotta clock in for my 5-minute interaction with Allegra. Again. Guys, I need a vacation from my vacation.
The other thing about this movie that I really appreciate, so Jess made a reference to the spinning top, which of course reference to Inception, right? And also when we were talking about how David Cronenberg isn't like, here's my philosophy and you should, whatever. Whereas, like, that's what Christopher Nolan is like in real life, where he's like, no, here's my ideas, and you should, look at what I've woven. And this movie is so much better than Inception. Sorry, it is. And it accomplishes, like, so many of the same things and so many of the same concepts, but, like, so much better. Because Inception is a movie about dreams made by a guy who I don't think has ever dreamed anything, because that's not how dreams work. And it's all about how dreams work. And it's like, no, this is actually how dreams work. There's like a logic, but an illogic. There's stuff that people do that doesn't really make sense when you actually examine it, but everybody kind of takes it for granted. And the way that sort of all these different events are kind of jump cut right in this movie, where they like suddenly are somewhere else.
That first time that happened, I thought I missed something. I was like, did I look away for a second?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, that's Jude Law looks as confused as I feel. So we're right on track.
And so I know it's about a video game, but it really feels more that it's about dream state, right? Like that's sort of what he's using to base this on. And it feels like a much more like the whole, when he's like putting together the tooth gun, right? From all the gross squiggly Chinese restaurant things. That's dream shit right there. Like that's the kind of thing that it seems like it sort of makes sense, but it doesn't when it's examined for more than 5 seconds.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think it's the better version of Inception with
Actually,
now that
you've said that, I feel like Inception is virtual reality.
Yeah.
And eXistenZ is dreams. You're right. They could switch. Virtual reality feels
switch
like
them.
It's Lawnmower Man. Which is what I was promised.
Movies.
When will it come?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, so Jess, as someone for whom this is a favorite movie, I can see. I'm glad I rewatched it. I'm glad I've watched it twice. I certainly appreciated it when it came out. I told people that it was actually really interesting and cool. And then when I rewatched it, I was like, again, deeply uncomfortable and not having a good time, but still very much kind of admire and appreciate what this movie is, in spite of the fact that I don't enjoy the experience of watching the movie. So explain to me why, like, what is it about this that made you watch it so many times over and over again? And like, did you find new things in it when you did, or is it just like you are obsessed with this concept?
I think it's twofold, obviously finding new things every time I'm watching it, talking to the three of you about it gives me new ideas for when I watch it again. My husband actually was appalled that I have never shown him this movie. He is not a gamer, so this should be very interesting to show a non-gamer who also hates horror movies this film. So I will be sure to report back his findings and how much he probably is going to absolutely hate this movie.
Okay.
But for me, it's more of like it's it's the reason why I play video games. It's escapism. So, I mean, when I watch this movie, I'm completely engrossed in what I am watching and completely engrossed in trying to figure out what is the plot, what are these other NPCs, if you will, doing when they're not on screen, because they're all in the same room. And, kind of like I just said, are they clocking in to meet up with her storyline,
Yeah.
or what did they have to do to get to where they were in their story to meet up with her? If you also think about it from the perspective of, this is a prototype for a new game that's coming out, it feels very cut. It's jumping back and forth. If you think about it from the perspective of if she's doing the world building while they're playing,
Mm-hmm.
so it's obviously not a completely fleshed out idea, and she has no idea what she's doing either, especially if she's thanking them for allowing her to be the game designer at the end. So it also leads you to question, is there someone who gets to play the game designer who then gets to build the world every time? So every time you play, it's something different. And I think that's why I like to keep watching it, because I also think we're going to get to that point in video games someday, that every time you play, it's going to be something different. And I think we're inching closer and closer to that as time continues.
Yeah.
I like it because I think this movie was just way ahead of its time.
It was.
I personally
100%.
did not think it was weird or squishy or gross, except for the ports. And here is my glue stick to.
No.
Listen, the scene at
And
the
it take
Chinese
more than that to close
restaurant
it up.
where it's
Yeah.
all just like.
Yes, that part I do very much dislike that part. But also I find it really impressive that was the path that her mind went down, that she was going to be able to eat this food and create this gun. Because if you think about it from the perspective of they're building the story as they go, and they're building and coming up with things that they need as they're going along, it's really cool.
It is super cool.
And gross.
Guns are terrifying, but it's pretty gosh darn cool.
And I just imagine like David Cronenberg like yelling at the Foley artist and being like, more squish! Like, no, up the squish. Make them throw up.
I would love to know what they used to make.
I don't want to know
what the Foley artists were.
It's interesting because it's not, for a Cronenberg film, the body horror is relatively toned down.
Agreed.
But there's a huge amount of animal body horror,
Yes.
and just like these awful dissections and awful meals and stuff. And I do think another way in which the movie's ahead of its time is this kind of like degradation of the earth and its creatures that we use to build our devices and, our creature comforts and our games.
You know what I do wish? I don't want to start everything over, but something I do wish, and maybe they said it and I missed it, is to get a clearer, not mission of the realists, but why are they afraid? What is it about this that is truly frightening?
Oh, I get it.
We think we know, but
I mean, first of all, it's like a combination of the Luddites, right? So it's this sort of like anti-tech terror that is, a very real thing in our history. But I also I think you're right on with like the QAnon thing.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same as the people who are anti-vax because being not vaccinated makes you pure. And there's this sense of not wanting to hand over a certain amount of autonomy to technology. And, but also in their case, but
it's so crazy to me.
I mean, yeah, but in their case, they're right because they really are in danger of literally cutting off people's access to reality. If you are creating an infinite sort of echo chamber where every layer of reality is the same, and so there isn't a grounding of reality. And I think that is a real actual danger that again with the way that sort of the internet has fractured our reality is really relevant and requires rebelling against and fucking shit up to like make it go the fuck away, because otherwise it's fascism real easy. So yeah, I completely understand where they're coming from. Like I side with the realists 100% in this case. Like I am not.
But
I don't want these games. No.
But with all things, moderation, is key.
Sure.
And I like my life, but I'm not so committed to reality that I don't want to step out from it. I mean, we are doing it by watching movies, yada yada yada. There's so many different ways we step out of it. So I guess I almost wanted to go, you guys better tell me about your lives and why you think they're so great, because I bet they're not that great, and you might want to get into a little existential crisis every once in a while.
Yeah, and I think obviously you would that wouldn't work, because you would know which version of you was the real one, because the real one had to eat a sandwich every once in a while, and you got hungry, and the real you was like, I gotta eat, please get out of the 3 layers of reality that you're deep in right now.
You can eat in the game.
Well, I don't think but I don't think we're close to that,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So as a realistic prospect, you're gonna have to go pee, and you're not going to do that in the metaverse or whatever. So
yeah. Reality it is.
Sorry, Julie, you were about to say something.
No, I was going to say, just in terms of conspiratorial thinking and the need for resistance and stuff, huge part of Cronenberg's movies in general, and especially in this one, are these big looming corporations who are trying to control the technology, who are trying to control people's bodies and to use them for their own ends. And I think that a lot of the resistance comes from this kind of anti-corporate theme that runs throughout his movies. And then I think you could also say, well, does it relate to QAnon today? A lot of QAnon conspiratorial thinking comes from the idea that big corporations can't be trusted and they're out to get you.
Yeah.
Right. Especially anti-tech. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if this is Cronenberg's analogy about studios in general, and just a reluctant participant in the studio system, but ultimately not wanting to have to deal with them and all of their stuff, and just wanting to do his own thing, but recognizing that he needs to be And so, yeah, he's talking about corporations, but I think he just might mean those gatekeepers, those Hollywood gatekeepers, maybe. But also corporations are not great.
I mean, fuck them all. Whatever, but they're all evil. So sure, it all works as far as I'm concerned. Jen, before we wrap up, you got to tell us where the term eXistenZ comes from. You found that in your research.
Not even. I feel like you guys are gonna be disappointed. The title eXistenZ. This is from the. Where was this from? He said it somewhere. The Metroactive interview, the April 1999 one. The title eXistenZ is a reference to the existentialists accepting total responsibility for his actions. That sentence, when you say it quickly, you think you get it, but then when you start to think about it, you go, I'm not sure. Also, I found myself also reading it as existence and not just existential, it's an existence.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what it means. That sounds like a word salad to me, but maybe my brain's a little tired.
Yeah. I mean, I figured that's what it meant. I didn't think
that's what you thought. Okay.
Yeah. Existentialism.
Sure. It's not that part. It's the other part where you begin to the existential crisis. And then I guess it's you don't have to have an existential crisis if you accept responsibility for your actions. Is that the implication? Ergo, you don't need eXistenZ. Ergo, really, Jen? Jesus Christ. I'm so sorry. That was embarrassing. I'm going to log off. It's time to deport.
Oh, all right. Anyway, this was it's a weird one to fit into our horror round here, but this movie just feels like it has to be. It's of the 99 horror movies, it needs to be in that canon, right? It is. If you like horror and you like Black Mirror and you like weird sci-fi shit and you like Cronenberg, this is the movie for you. And if you haven't seen it, see it. And so anyway, Julia and Jess, you're returning guests, so you've been asked the big questions before, but I guess here's it's spooky season, so I'm going to ask you both this question instead. What is your favorite horror movie? Do you like scary movies? No,
I was about to say, do it the right way.
Favorite horror movie? I can't pretend I said that in a cool ghost facey way, I guess. Sydney. Is that pretty good? That sounded pretty good to me. I don't know. Jess, what's your favorite horror movie?
I like this movie called The Loved Ones.
Ooh.
It is not for the faint of heart. If you do not like bloody movies, don't watch it.
Okay. Why are they loved ones? What is it about? Or is would that ruin it?
It would ruin it. Okay. I don't want to ruin it.
So like anything about the plot would ruin it?
Yeah, just you gotta watch it. I mean, yeah, it's good. Okay. It's really good. But it's like super bloody.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm one of those people that I can watch. I've watched so many horror movies that I watch them now and I just laugh.
Yeah.
So like, if someone sends me a recommendation for a movie that actually is going to scare the shit out of me, I would thank you, because I have not seen a very scary movie in a very long time.
Okay. Is there anybody in this movie that we would know? I've never heard of it.
I just looked it up. I didn't recognize anyone. It looks very good.
No.
2009. I'm ready.
Okay. So like,
I found it on some weird list that was like, you should watch this movie. So I did it.
All right.
I'm ready to watch Obama era horror films.
We were so naive at the time.
You sure were.
Julia, what's your favorite horror movie?
I'm going to go with one. I'm going to stick with Cronenberg, but one I just saw for the first time recently, which is Shivers, which is about this like bougie apartment complex in Montreal, and they get beset by a sex parasite that turns them all into rabid zombie horn dogs. And it's like it's very early. It's very, low budget, kind of like a, George Romero type feeling vibe, but it's just really incredibly icky and incredibly scary on a more intellectual level. And it's actually just reading a quote from John Waters, who said, he sees this film made by Cronenberg in 1975. And he says, this is an AIDS movie. He made a movie about AIDS before the AIDS crisis.
Well, that's interesting. As I sit in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. I've heard a lot of people talk about that movie recently. I don't think I even realized it was a David Cronenberg movie. I definitely have not seen it. But I'll have to check it out. And Jess, I might not be able to stomach.
Probably not, man. I'm just gonna be honest. It's real squishy.
Yeah, it sounds like too much squish for me. But if the squishiness was your favorite part of eXistenZ, then go check that out. Thank you guys both for being here. This was great. Happy Halloween to both of you. Enjoy what remains of the last few days of spooky season. You guys have any good Halloween plans? I know, Jess, you've got kids, so that's what your Halloween plans are.
Make chocolate and watch movies.
Nice.
That's pretty much it.
Sounds good to me. Well, happy Halloween, you guys, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with another scary movie. We haven't decided what we're going to do yet, so we have a list, but we've decided it's more fun in the spirit of Halloween movies to
seeing what I'm doing. Can we do?
Yeah, let's do that. How would you tease that movie?
Okay, let me think. This is a movie where you're gonna see holes, but also a burn.
Oh, there you go. I like that. That's good. Yep.
Awesome.
I like it. Holes and a burn. It's good. All right. Thanks, guys. Look out for frogs. We'll see you next time.